What is up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Guarani Vision, the first ever podcast dedicated to Paraguayan football in English. As always, I'm Roberto Rojas, and joining me as always are my two great co-hosts, Federico Perez and Ralph Hannah. And guys, we're swinging into a new month. Obviously, you're getting some seasons that are getting wrapped up. Obviously, you got a lot of places being played to determine who's going to qualify to a next round of a competition. Obviously, league titles to possibly be decided. And so many other things going on in the world of football. I mean, obviously, it's an interesting month. It's an interesting year, I would say, because typically during this time, on a normal scale, it's a World Cup year, obviously, but there is no World Cup yet, at least not until November. So it's going to be interesting as we head into this North American summer for Ralph and I, and for you, Fede, a Paraguayan winter, with a little bit of difference in the world of football. But nevertheless, we're here to talk about what's been going on all across the world of football, what's happening to Paraguayans, the women's game as well. We'll mention that. And yeah, I mean, I'm excited to talk about it. Let's go straight to the mother country, as I always like to say, to Fede Perez, who, you know, I think is possibly adopting some Miami flavor in him, because obviously Miami has been kind of the scene over the last few days, obviously with the Heat playing in the playoffs. The Formula One Grand Prix was actually there for the first time ever. And obviously a Bad Bunny album as well. I mean, that's something Miami, that's something to mention. So for both of you guys, for Ralph as well, who's based there, it's must be a good time to have some sort of connection to Miami. But nevertheless, Fede, how are you, man?
I'm good, Roberto. It's nice to see you. Nice to see Ralph. Unfortunately, we don't have Maria on, but you just mentioned the Miami Heat, and she's actually at the game right now as we're recording. Game 5 going on.
Lucky her.
Yeah, lucky her. Yeah, she gets to be there at the venue, watch some sports. And here in Paraguay, meanwhile, we have so much football going on. We have so many games. We had Libertadores last week. We have league action during the week this time around. And also we have a couple of holidays. I think we have Mother's Day this weekend here in Paraguay. You guys had it last weekend. So happy Mother's Days to your mom, Roberto, to your mom, Ralph, obviously also to Maria's mom, and to everybody's mother who watches us and listens to us, be it at YouTube or at Spotify or whatever format you listen to us. Obviously we got to talk about what's going on this week with the games. The last weekend we had a very important clásico, the white and black clásico, blanco y negro as they call it here, the mix around with those colors, because we had Libertad go up against Olimpia after a long time. Libertad had them at their ground, at their venue, and it was a very important match for the tournament, I believe, because it was probably Olympia's last shot at the tournament, or try to at least catch up to these two teams, which are Cerro Porteño and Libertad, who are at top. Libertad actually has the advantage. They have a point advantage, which they have to maintain in pretty much every week. We have Copa America also starting out this week. We have Julio Enciso's injury, unfortunately, one of the best gems, one of the best players we've seen lately, young players, and unfortunately he's going to be pretty much out for the rest of the year. And you know, this is not the first one that we've lost in this 2022. We had Robert Morales. I mean, I kind of want this tournament to be over in that sense, Roberto, because you know, we've seen so many important players out of the game, and it was going to be such an important year for these two players especially. And Julio Enciso was being the top scorer, so I'm really kind of bummed out about his injury. And we got to talk about that. We got to talk about everything that's happening in the Women's League also, because it is coming to an end. The Apertura, the 3 last games of the tournament. I want to talk a little bit about what's going on with Olimpia, because they might clinch up for the first time. They might actually be champions also in the women's game. So yeah, we got plenty to talk about in this brand new episode of Guarani Vision.
Hey guys, yeah, so much happening, as Fede was saying there. I mean, lots to get into. The Libertad keep going at the top. We didn't mention Cerro, but Cerro beating Guarani as well. So that's the real kind of title race that's happening. Let's do a quick shout out to Pastoreo FC down in the Intermedia as well, because they're actually top of the league. They're a team from Casapa that got not Casapa, Caguasu, that got promoted last season. And they're very similar, maybe a very similar story to someone like Guaireña that came up through Interligas And actually, their coach was with them since Interligas, Elio de la Cruz. And they're top of the Intermedia, they're joint top now with Luqueño. Luqueño drop points. So that's really exciting because we might see another side from the countryside making it to Primera. It's still early days there, but that's pretty cool. And yeah, lots going on. We've got the women's game, like Fede is talking about. I mean, Olimpia beating Sol de America was really important for them. And let's give a shout out to a couple of veteran players over the last few days that have been scoring some goals. Pablo Zeballos scored his 115th goal today for Emiliano, and over the weekend for Fernando Fernandez, prior to the weekend, he was going into the game on 100 goals if it's official for Guarani, or 98 because he has 2 goals that were not awarded to him after the game got kind of suspended or called ineligible. But yeah, lots of these golden oldies coming back, I guess, and making their mark on Paraguayan football. So yeah, lots going on, like ready to get into it.
Lots to talk about. So let's go straight into what's been going on in the local league. Obviously, at the time of recording, we have some games midweek. We have some games that are happening right now, actually. Libertad are currently drawing Tacuaru 0-0, but as it stands, Libertad would still have a 1-point advantage over Cerro Porteño, who obviously will play tomorrow against Guarani. And, obviously we saw some games over the weekend as well. We saw Cerro Porteño clawing back, actually, against a 10-man Club Guarani, thanks to goals from Claudio Aquino and Carlos Rolon. This was actually a game that saw another injury happen. We saw this with already injuries happening to Fabian Franco, for example. And, this has been interesting to say. And we also saw this with Olimpia against Libertad, obviously Libertad being the winners on the game. But we did see with the Roque Santa Cruz goal, but we did see an injury happening to obviously one of those bright gems like you had mentioned, Fede, in Julio Enciso. I mean, this has been kind of something that, okay, we understand that the Paraguayan league is aggressive. We know that. We've seen that. Being the kind of people that watch this, we know this kind of sport that's going on. But it's kind of interesting to see that some of the top players from the local league, obviously we mentioned about Morales beforehand, but now with Enciso coming in, possibly, at the time of recording, playing his final game in a Libertad shirt because of the severity of his injury. I mean, this is getting way out of hand, don't you think, Fede? I mean, is this something where you kind of have to think to yourself, okay, maybe we do need to protect our stars and be more, you would say, aggressive, I guess, to those that give them those fouls, for example?
I actually think that it was totally. I think it was an accident, actually. I think there was no bad intention from Luis Zarate, the young defender of Olimpia, who was actually, the player that was probably going up against Julio Enciso the most at this game. And he had already gotten a yellow card really early in the game. So he was conditioned. He had to take care of himself, and he went for this ball right in midfield, and Julio Enciso beat him to it, just like Julio normally does. He's been doing that all season around. I mean, he's pretty much been unstoppable for almost all defense, all the defenders in the Paraguayan league. And I said this before, they're trying to look for a way to stop him. And sometimes, you don't get to the ball at time, you don't get to the play at time, and you still want to go at it, you still want to contest it. And I do see that a lot here in the Paraguay game lately, and it's unfortunate. You're seeing a lot of injuries, but I do think I want to think it's a bad streak. I don't want to think it's because of how we play here. I don't want to think it's because of the aggressiveness that you just mentioned, Roberto. Yeah, it is a very physical game here in Paraguay. It's known for their strong defenders, but I do think this was an accident, and Julio Enciso beat Luis Zarate to the play. He hits the ball, and when he's turning around, he finds Luis Zarate's shoulder, and unfortunately that shoulder, it's just pure bone, and that went up against his face. and the face is very vulnerable to stuff like that. We're seeing a lot of injuries like that in football right now. I mean, we're seeing elbows to the face and players breaking their faces, noses. We're seeing this, and FIFA is pretty radical in this situation. They've actually asked the refs to take red cards straight out in these kind of situations. And Luis Zarate already had a yellow, and it was a very controversial play, especially for Olympia fans, and it was a game changer also, because it was a very important match for Olympia. They needed to win this one, and it happened in the first half of the game. And when you saw Julio Enciso go down, obviously you were gonna you were I was really concerned about his situation, just because he's not that kind of player that usually tries to take advantage of these situations, and then we saw him leave the stadium in the ambulance, and we all obviously got very worried. Unfortunately, yeah, he's not going to be back for the rest of the season. Libertad loses him also for the Libertadores, and hopefully this does not affect his future. Hopefully this does not affect a possible transfer also, because this was something that was talked about lately. In his situation, he almost left at the end of last season, and he will probably leave at mid-season here at mid-year, and it is probably his time to leave. Hopefully we haven't seen the last of him in a Libertad jersey, but I felt that way after seeing Olimpia go against Libertad. Leaving the stadium, I was actually thinking what you just said, Roberto. Maybe I saw the last of Julio Enciso with the Libertad jersey, because this kid is unstoppable. He's making the difference for his team. He's so young. There's going to be a lot of teams going after him. He was top scorer of the tournament as he was leaving in that ambulance. So, I mean, who's not going to want this kid, right? And he's been so important for Libertad in this tournament, and Libertad really missed one of their top players, no doubt about it, and it could even affect them on this title race they have going up against Cerro Porteño. But I love to hear Ralph's take on it, because for me it was an accident, a very unfortunate accident that's going to cost Luis Zarate a couple of games. But the worst of it is to see Julio Enciso, a very young player, not being able to play for a long time.
Yeah, I agree with you, Fede. I think it was an accident. If you look, they're actually not that close to the ball. So it's as you mentioned, it's kind of Julio Enciso is just much faster to the ball, and he's trying to lead in and catches him. Maybe some people interpreted it as it was a kind of a harsh challenge or a rough challenge because of the yellow card. He got the yellow card about, I don't know, 10 minutes prior to that, when they were both racing for a ball, and he kind of shoved Enciso off the ball. But again, I don't think it was that kind of malice or bad intent. But what we have seen with Enciso is he was playing so well that he was getting fouled so much. I don't have the stats, but I would imagine he's the most fouled player in the league, and it's because he's one of the best. Well, he is the best player in that league. So in a way, we saw this coming. It was always a risk after January, when the move broke down, that he would come back to Paraguay and people would be out for him, and they were even more out for him, but not in a bad way, but because he was playing so good and he was a top scorer, like you mentioned. I mean, I would say that kind of injury, thankfully, it's not very serious. It's not like Morales, who has the knee ligament injury. This shouldn't affect him long term. Probably he could even have come back. I mean, a lot of players can play in protective masks and that kind of thing. But I think at this point they said, right, we can't risk this anymore. He's the Hoya, he's the jewel, and we're not going to risk him in these last few games, because there's only, let's say seven games or so until he can possibly move. So I think they gave the 2-month period of time that he would be out. So that takes us to July. And that means he's surely going to be at another club. Whether it's Brighton, we don't know, because his agent was in Brighton at the weekend. He put something on his Instagram stories that people saw him there. So maybe it's Brighton, but whatever. I think he's definitely going to be moving on. And good for him.
The number one option is still Brighton, Ralph.
Yeah.
For what I'm hearing down here in Paraguay, the number one option is still Brighton. But there's still going to be a lot more teams going after this kid.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think obviously we have been speaking about this obviously over the last few months. I think it's still the right club for him to go because of the track history that there's other clubs that were interested like Leipzig, Salzburg. I think Nice were also interested in the Atalanta as well.
They asked his
Brighton
manager about Arsenal also. Arsenal.
Interesting. But I think when you look at everything and when you look at the position that Enciso's in and the reputation that Brighton has, you would think that it's the right club for him to really develop as that next top player.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, what Brighton seems to have done very well is that recruitment of young players and then managing them through the adaptation period, which is something I think we've spoken about before, that sometimes in Paraguay, these players make the move and then they're kind of left on their own. Brian Ojeda is an example in Nottingham Forest that I don't think he's had that kind of support, and they're not even using him in under 23s, which is quite frustrating because he could be playing in the under 23s team. But Brighton seem to have managed players very well. They'll take them on loan if necessary. They're definitely helping players with their English and that kind of thing, because Moises Caicedo, who's another youngster that's gone from Ecuador, I mean, he's doing interviews in English, and I'm quite impressed by that because he hasn't been there for that long. So I think, yeah, that's the place we'd like him to go, or I would like to see him go. I think it's also a team that's not really struggling in relegation, and they're not really fighting for European spots, or not yet, maybe next season. So there wouldn't be huge pressure on him. I think somebody like Almiron, when he went to Newcastle, he ended up finding himself under huge pressure because the team weren't doing that well, and they needed him. And then he found himself in a very sort of defensive team almost with Steve Bruce, whereas Brighton play quite progressive football. So I think, yeah, definitely I would hope Enciso can land himself there.
Absolutely. And obviously we'll keep an eye on what's happening with Enciso as this kind of transfer rumors gets heated up. Obviously the transfer window opens in a couple of weeks here, so obviously a lot to talk about as we switch gears now to what's been going on here stateside. We're going to switch gears about a situation that a lot of us have really followed for those into Paraguayan football, is the case of Cecilio Dominguez. Cecilio Dominguez, obviously the Austin FC player, was actually suspended off of suspicion of possible, in this case, what Austin FC used as an action that was off the pitch. Now, obviously, at the time, nobody knew what had occurred, but then the rumors started to come in, and then eventually we did find that it was in this case, perhaps sexual assault dispute in this case. And Ralph, I mean, obviously the legalities of all this, I'm gonna go to you first, makes this kind of situation very interesting, because we saw the Austin FC fans react very passionately about this. Those that are saying that they don't want him back at the club to even play. Obviously, we saw in their game on the weekend where they actually had a few minutes of silence to kind of, support the idea that they don't want this guy to play on the team. And obviously, we now see him back in the training ground. So this is really a weird situation. And, Fede, obviously, you've been able to follow Cecilio's career. You also know about the dark history of Cecilio's Dominguez's life as well, and those kind of things. But Ralph, I want to go to you first on this one, because it's a weird situation to be in, I guess, if you are Cecilio Dominguez.
Yeah, it's a strange situation because it's not very black and white, I suppose, because from usually the way the MLS and the league would work there, and this is actually common in all American sports, is if you were to have been investigated by the police and anything was going to be prosecuted, you were going to be charged or anything, then you're just immediately, you're out, you're suspended and everything. And that's quite clear. In this case, from the legal side, while the police were called to their residence because of suspected domestic abuse, that's what started this investigation. But what has happened is Cecilio's partner, she's decided not to press charges. So there's no legal issue anymore facing Cecilio Dominguez. There is obviously suspicion that of something has happened there, partly because of the history which you mentioned, Roberto, but also that both he and his partner are in counseling at the moment. So the league have decided that they see something isn't right there, whether or not the police are involved or not. But legally, he's cleared to play, and that's why he's back in the team. But now we have the second part, and this is where it gets harder, right? Is there's an image here. There's an image for Austin FC. There's, do we want our DP, our designated player, like the kind of star player? Do we want this person who's now been associated with this kind of incident? Do we really want them on our team? And the fans have said no. At least at the moment, they've rejected that in very strong terms. With the it was like a prolonged silence. It wasn't really a minute silence. It was a bit longer during the game. And then also I've seen people on social media. I mean, some of the people in that organized fan group have come out and said, this isn't what we're about. We don't want this kind of person in our team, that kind of thing. Josh Wolf's been asked about it. He was a bit more guarded. He kind of said, well, he's not going to play for at least 5 weeks because of his physical situation, but he didn't want to get into this longer term thing of, will he ever play again? Is he, once he is fit, am I going to pick him? That's not clear. The only thing the coach has said in this press conference is kind of, well, he's not even fit, so he's not in my plans because of that. But yeah, it's a sensitive situation for sure, and I'm not sure what his future holds. I don't think anybody knows right now. I don't know what Fede thinks.
Well, I hate to see this happen to Cecilio because he has the reputation. Unfortunately, he's had trouble before in other clubs, and if in Austin's shoes, they probably saw this coming. When they hired him and they looked at his background and they asked about him and his behavior, and this could happen. And unfortunately, it was in the chances. It was in the possibilities that he could not behave. Like he could have an incident like this one, just like anybody does with their girlfriends, just a fight. But when they call the police and when there's an investigation and you're a professional player and you have a contract signed and there's a new club that put in a whole bunch of money for you and you depend on that image also, you really have to take care of that. And it's unfortunate to see that from Cecilio, especially after everything he's gone through in his career, to still having he's over 30 now and still having these issues in his career. I mean, I was really not expecting this from him now. I thought he was going to mature. I thought he was going to be a lot better. Thank you, Roberto. He's 27. Well, he's not over 30 yet, but he's been through so much up until now that you would expect for him to mature. You would expect for him to learn from the experiences. And I thought his life was going to be pretty calm in Austin. I thought he was going to become a star in this team because they were going to build a team mostly around him. And he was starting to be that star this season. He was scoring a couple of goals. He started out pretty well. I actually heard that he was training really hard here off season in Paraguay as he was in vacation. So I was really looking forward to this season for Cecilio Dominguez. I thought he was going to probably be one of the most important players as a Paraguayan player in the MLS this season. I'm really happy for Seba Ferreira. Also, he's doing really well. One of the new players there. But you were waiting for Cecilio. This was going to be his second season, so you were thinking, okay, he's going to be settled down now, and he knows his teammates a whole bunch more. He knows the city. English is not an issue probably now for him. So you were expecting for this season to be his season and for this to happen to him. And, for the team itself, this is not a good image for the team. I understand it from the Austin side. Also, I understand the fans going after him because, for somebody that I lived in the United States for a couple of years, I know these issues, these matters are not taken lightly over there, and when something like this goes on your rep, people are not going to let that go very easily. And I think they're not going to make it easy on Cecilio to come back. And I was asking you guys off the air, does Austin really need him right now? Because I think they're doing really well. So I don't know if they really need Cecilio to come back to the team and be an issue in the locker room, be a problem with the fans. Maybe just let this whole thing cool down, let a couple of games go by, make him train really hard. And when he's ready to make a difference in the pitch again, bring him back, because that's the only way people are going to forget about this thing. Him scoring and doing his job on the pitch. Hopefully that's what happens, because if not, we might have to see Cecilio leaving Austin, and that's not really what I want. I was asking you guys also, up until when does he has to stay in Austin? And apparently he has contract up until 2024, so he still has 2 more years in this team where he has to do his job. So I don't want to see him come back yet to Paraguay. I don't want to see him come back to Cerro Porteño, Sudamérica. I want to see him out there and hopefully open the doors for other Paraguayans, but he needs to clear up his image, Ralph.
Yeah, there's also an argument that it's better for him to be in Austin because he is receiving counseling right now, which, if we're honest, no Paraguayan club is offering that. Nobody's going to be paying for that while you're not playing and producing for the team. And even if you were, I just don't think that's not such a common thing there. So maybe with this counseling and with this time off the pitch, then he can improve as a person and take that maturity that you're talking about, and also try and build that relationship, because obviously in his personal life, his partner, she has seen something in this relationship, which is why she's still there. She hasn't pressed charges, particularly because they have a child together. So maybe this is the best thing for him as a person, not just as a footballer, to stay in Austin as well.
Yeah, it's honestly a weird situation. It's going to be interesting to see how this all develops. Obviously we don't want to speak from a morality point of view, but obviously I think something like this, be it any sort of domestic abuse, is very much condemned, and we're not here to say
he hasn't issued a statement or anything, right, Roberto? He hasn't talked
not at
about
the
this
moment.
issue ever
No.
since it started, right?
Nope, has not, which makes it interesting. I think even a simple apology or something that he has to say, and I'm sure I think it's still it's a delicate matter. I mean, obviously, I hope none of you guys have been through this kind of thing, and I haven't either, but this is something, like you said, Fede, this isn't taken lightly. This is something that is very much a serious matter, and it happens, unfortunately. In this case, Cecilio didn't go to that extreme, but we do see it in other sports in this country where it goes into even more extreme matters, mainly from NFL players or NBA players, where domestic abuse, to the extent maybe even to violence, does occur. And that is not taken lightly, especially in this age where, social media is a huge factor. There's a big movement to really stop these things. And it's those things that could indeed danger Cecilio Dominguez's career if it indeed goes a darker path.
Hopefully this was the last episode of it, and him coming back to training ground is the next step to him coming back, right, to play for the Austin fans, and hopefully their fans also kind of understand the situation. That's why I was asking you if Cecilio has talked about it, if he has made a statement about it, because especially when it's a new club and when fans have put in so much confidence in you, I think you owe them to them, just to like a couple of words, just like you said, maybe an apology, or I'm concentrated in what we have to do now. We have the rest of the season up ahead of us. I mean, talk about it from that point, from that side, maybe not talk from a personal side, but be professional about it. I think that's what Cecilio needs to show now coming back to Austin.
Absolutely. And we'll definitely see what happens to him as the MLS season continues this year, as now we switch gears to another topic that I think is very interesting. And Fede, obviously, and Ralph as well, you guys are big advocates of this, as like everyone else is at Guarani Vision. Let's switch to the women's game, because we have some leagues that are being decided, and obviously this comes at a good time, especially with the Copa America Femenino, the qualifiers for the 2023 World Cup that is happening next year. This is coming at a good moment, Fede, and why don't you just give an update of what's been going on in the women's game?
Yeah, well, we actually had a change in the format for the tournaments this year in the Apertura. For the women's game, we have 13 games played one after the other one. No head to head after this. The team that makes the most points is going to be the champion, just like it happens on the men's game. They kind of copied and pasted that tournament, that format. And Olympia's in that first spot right now. Actually, they've been on that first spot ever since the first game, because they are yet to lose a game so far, and they actually they've had very important games in these last couple of weeks, because they had the Super Clásico played in Cerro Porteño Stadium, and they actually won 2-0 that game. And then they went up against Sol de America in Villa Lisa as an away team also, and they end up winning that game by 1-0. So it's almost in Olympia's hands right now. They only have 3 more games left, and they're trying to put the fans by their side. They're trying to play in the afternoon in their big stadium. The women's football here it's a big movement right now. It's trying to grow. We're showing the games on TV, most of them, and fans are really behind what's going on now with the women's game. We have professional contracts for them, and the women's game is really, it's growing here. But I wanted to talk especially about this Olympia team, because Olympia is such a big team here, such a big club, but they've never been champions of the women's game, and it's mostly been for Cerro Porteño. They're the team that's won most of the titles, and then you have Libertad Limpeño, who have always worked really well ever since these two clubs came together. Sol de America also. These are the best and most important teams in the women's game. And you were kind of waiting for Olympia to catch up eventually, Ralph, and they really have this year. They took a lot of players from Cerro Porteño's base last year. The Cerro was the best team in 2021. They took most of their players, and they built up a great team, and I'm really happy for them, because they've been really looking for this. So it talks really well about what they've done off the pitch to get to this point. First spot, no loss so far, and just 3 games away from a championship.
Yeah, they've won every game, not just no loss, right? They haven't even drawn. They've won every game. It's interesting because Cerro and Libertad Limpeño have a slightly better goal difference than Olympia, which shows they've been winning games and winning them big. But Olympia's come out when they go head to head. They've come out like in that Super Clásico, and they beat Sol de America in the last round of games, which I think I read is the first time Olympia had ever beaten Sol de America in women's football. So that's really some of the improvements. And yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I don't get to watch the games from here. Last year, I think the final was on YouTube, but now because there's no playoffs and finals, I'm not sure if I'll be able to catch it. But I mean, what caught my eye is they have Amada Peralta. I think she's the top scorer for Olympia, and also Karina Castellanos scored 7 goals. And like, from what I can think off the top of my head, she's got all the big goals in the last few games. So it's quite nice to see a couple of these names thinking ahead to what's going to be the Copa America Femenina, right?
Those 2 players that you mentioned, both of them last year were here in Paraguay playing the local league, and they did so well that they went to Colombia. They got some experience there, and now they're back in the Paraguayan league. That's what's going on lately here with the big players, the good players. They leave and then they come back, but they come back a lot better, and that's just making the league very exciting, Ralph.
Yeah, it's good. It's good to see. And you were saying about the professional players, just a reminder to people. I think this year 6 players have to be professional, so it's still not a fully professional league, but there's a whole plan in place by the APF that they're working towards. They've also got the new high performance center specifically for the women's national team that's still in construction, but they're trying to set that up alongside the men have, of course, had their high performance training center for a long time. I mean, a really good one since pretty much the 2010 World Cup, with some of that money from going so far. But now the women are going to have their base as well, which is important. Let's assume and hope they can book that ticket to Australia, New Zealand in 2023, and then they'll have somewhere to prepare for that. So yeah, so it's looking up for the women's game in Paraguay.
Absolutely. And obviously, we'll keep our eye on what's been going on as we switch gears on our final topic, guys, to see what's been going on in a tournament that we always like to talk about because of the surprises is the Copa Paraguay. The Copa Paraguay was actually back today. We saw two games happen at the moment. We saw 8 de septiembre defeat Porvenir 3-0 and 24 de septiembre defeat General Diaz. If you recall, General Diaz was a team that was actually playing in the first division, but has since gotten on really bad terms. But nevertheless, guys, this is obviously something that we enjoy. And obviously, Ralph, you've been following it. Fede, of course, you've been commentating games on Tigo for that. And yeah, I mean, I guess to speak to both of you guys, what's on stake for this Copa Paraguay, at least in the first round?
Yeah, I mean, the first round doesn't have the big teams. So these are all kind of almost regional teams. So you're talking, I mean, General Diaz were there, but like Porvenir is a team from Toati, which is in the Cordillera region. It's like kind of high. Not Paraguay doesn't really have mountains, but it's like one of the higher regions. And then the two Septiembre teams are from Areguá, which is the capital of strawberries. It's the home of Alexis Pulpito Duarte, and it's very close to Luque and then Asuncion. So it's like a kind of getaway town for a lot of people at the weekends and stuff. And I mean, it's really good. This first team, 8 de septiembre, I was really surprised because I saw Jorge Achucarro was playing on the side. And the last time I saw him, he's 40 years old. He was managing the Cerro under 19s, I think, or something.
He still is, Ralph.
So he's just turned up for this Copa Paraguay, registered himself. But he's not the most surprising player on their team because their captain turns out that he is the mayor of the town of Areguá. He's a politician and he captains the side. I don't know.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious. That's just hilarious. That just made my day today. On the first game, on the first match, we already had the mayor of the city play for one of these teams. I don't know if people around the world, I don't know if they understand everything that goes on in this Copa Paraguay, everything that has to do with this a brand new tournament. For me, it's still a new tournament. For the teams, it is, because we still have a lot of teams that are coming in for the first time into this tournament. This time around, we have 74 teams from 39 different cities of the country. So yeah, we're gonna have a whole bunch of surprises. And for some of these teams to build something, or for even to get a roster together, Ralph, Roberto, it opens it up for the whole city and even for the mayor. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a whole bunch more stories like this one in other teams. If they can make it far enough in this Copa Paraguay, that's another thing, right? I mean, you have a 40-year-old striker going up against the first division team eventually. I don't think you're going to make it that far. I don't think you're going to make it to the top four. But hey, look, it's an opportunity for everyone. I've seen players, I think in this Copa Paraguay in the first year, we had a player that was 45, 46 years old. He was also the president of Deportivo Recoleta, and he was also playing out there. So the president being the president and also turning into a player. So we've had all kinds of stories so far in Copa Paraguay, and I think we're going to have a whole bunch more this 2022. Hopefully we have a couple of good players also going around, Roberto, and hopefully this opens up the door to see players from the countryside and maybe bringing them to the capital, to the big clubs, to the big teams, which is what I believe is the intention, obviously, behind Copa America, right? To see the teams that we usually don't get a chance to see on TV against the big teams. And it is a big chance for them.
Well, we saw that last year, obviously, with a lot of these teams getting those kind of upsets. So it only would make sense to have that happen again this year. I mean, when you're seeing stories like that, a mayor playing on a team in basically a domestic football competition in a South American country. I mean, wow, you don't get as random. I know sometimes this country is random and out of context, but man, those kind of things makes you feel like, hell, I want that. I want that team to do well. I want that team to go far. But nevertheless, yeah, I think we're going to be really keeping our ears and eyes open about what's going on in this competition as we kind of switch gears and close off another great episode of Guarani Vision. So for myself, Roberto Rojas, Fede Perez, and Ralph Hannah, thank you so much for listening in. See you soon.